rewrite it as memoir. Scrap 4 years of hard work and tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. God help me, I said maybe. But in my heart, I knew I was done with this story. I had already written it as a show and a novel. I didn't have it in me to write a memoir too. I mean, what would happen if the memoir failed? Would I write it as a libretto? An epic poem, perhaps? No, it was time to move on. Over the next 2 years, I wrote short fiction and a third of a novel about a woman who was a failed novelist. I also performed Yoga Bitch all over the country, and as I talked to my audiences afterward, I began to see how effortless it was to make what really happened funny. I didn't need to gin up hilarious dialogue when my roommate in Bali said things like, I want a man who will be a man to my woman, a man who will be the lingam to my yoni. That's a direct quote from life. Who needs fiction? And then, nearly a year after my agent told me to consider a memoir, I woke up in the middle of the night with an epiphany. If I was going to write a memoir, I wanted it to be a conversation between the past and the present, between perspective and no perspective. That is something memoir is uniquely suited to explore, and a challenge I quite suddenly found attractive. As soon as I knew that, I began the hard work of finding the right voice, starting the book over and over again, scrapping beginning after beginning, outline after outline. I did this work almost in spite of myself, marveling at the fact that I might actually still be invested in this story. And what was more, I discovered that I loved writing memoir. I loved rewriting my story as it actually happened. What boggled my mind, though, was that I found myself wanting to write this story whether I ended up with a book contract or not, just for the chance to relive my life with perspective, to be both inside my experiences and outside of them as well. Once I gave in to the idea of memoir, I became less fixated on becoming a published author and more interested in becoming a writer. Of course, I still wanted to publish my work, every writer does, but the emphasis had shifted. It was the work that mattered most to me, not the status. During this process, I read and reread every single spiritual memoir I could get my hands on. Many of them I had never read before. Some, like Anne Lamott's Traveling Mercies, were among the few books I regularly reread. And finally, it was time. I read Eat, Pray, Love. And you know what? It was good. I mean, it's a good book. Of course people love it. Elizabeth Gilbert's a charming writer. She tells a good tale. And in the end, she not only finds herself, but she finds God and a boyfriend. Chicks love that. And as predicted, when I got to the part where she falls in love with a man 18 years older than her, 18 years being the magic number separating my age from my husband's, I thought, holy Christ, this woman really is living my life. Either I need to kill her or become best friends with her. But the more I read, the more it seemed that if Liz Gilbert really was another version of me, well, she was the successful version of me. The one who goes looking for God and faith and self and finds all three. She's a woman who gets results. I couldn't help but notice that my story is more about failure. About how failure can be hilarious, for instance, when the goal in yoga class is to be so open you don't mind farting in public. About how fear of failure keeps us trapped in lives we don't want. About how embracing failure can shape us into more compassionate people. And about how we go on when we fail to find the God we went looking for, or a spiritual practice without holes in it. That's what I was thinking about as I wrote and rewrote beginnings to my memoir and over again deleted them. Not long after I finished Eat, Pray, Love, I went to a yoga class taught by a woman who spoke like a cross between a phone sex operator and a poetry slam contestant. She kept asking us to pretend we were floating on a cloud. This is not something I generally like to do, but you know, she was trying to get us in a meditative mood. And soon enough, I realized that I was, in fact, deep in meditation, and that what I was meditating on was a slow-motion mind movie of me punching this yoga teacher in the face. I came home knowing exactly how to start my memoir. And I knew that my story was going to be very different from Elizabeth Gilbert's, even if we both do yoga, and write, and travel, and love an older man. Because no matter how upset Liz Gilbert gets in her book, and she does suffer mightily while meditating and chanting and meditating, she never, ever dreams about punching her guru in the face. Hard road becoming a writer, and what's funny to me, and I wrote this ages ago, when you first get your book contract, they send you something called the author questionnaire, where they want to learn what your story was, like how did you get published, and that's when this came out. What's funny to me is that that's like the beginning. That's just the beginning. There's so much that comes afterwards that you start to learn as you actually go through the process of working as an author under contract. So I have a whole nother essay I'm going to read about. No, just kidding. So if you guys got some more juice, you want to hear some stuff from the book? You run out of steam just to start throwing things. So this is from the beginning of the story. Today, I found myself strangely moved by a yoga teacher who spoke like a cross between a phone sex operator and a poetry slam contestant. At the start of class, she asked us to pretend we were floating on a cloud. As she put it, you're opening your heart to that cloud, you're floating, you're blossoming out and tuning in, you're evanescing. Yeah, that's right, you're evanescing. I briefly contemplated giving the teacher my yoga finger and walking out. I've been practicing yoga for close to a decade now, and at 34, I'm too old for that airy-fairy horse shit. As far as I'm concerned, floating on a cloud sounds less like a pleasant spiritual exercise and more like what you think you're doing when you're on LSD while falling out of an airplane. But I tuned out her mellifluous, yogier-than-thou voice, and soon enough found myself really meditating. Of course, I was meditating on punching this yoga teacher in the face, but still. At the end of class, she asked us to join her in a chant. Gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate. Which means, she said, her voice shedding its yoga-bot tones, gone, gone, gone beyond. She was young, a little cupcake of a yoga teacher in her black and gray yoga outfit. Maybe she was 25, maybe younger. She said her grandmother had recently passed away, and she wanted to chant for her and for all of our beloveds who had already gone beyond. In that moment, I forgave her everything, wanted to button up her sweater and give her a cup of cocoa. I chanted, gone, gone, gone beyond, for her beloved and for mine, and for the 25-year-old I once was. So that's where the story begins, with me at 25, shortly before September 11th, actually, when I was en route to New York, and I was, excited to be starting my life as a writer and a performer and a secretary. But then September 11th happened, and all of a sudden this thing that I was supposed to be doing, this big, exciting leap into the future, seemed like the most precarious thing I had ever thought about doing. I was terrified. And I didn't know if I wanted to leave Seattle. I found myself wondering how long it would take me to walk home to Seattle from New York in the case of an apocalypse. I mean, my head was in kind of I wasn't seeing Ganesha when I looked in the mirror, but, it was close. And then one night I found myself wandering into this yoga studio, and there was this beautiful woman who was grounded and wise, and she had found everything in her life through yoga. She had found herself, she had found a relationship with some type of God, and she had found the love of her life, all through yoga. And I was in the market for all of those things. So very swiftly I found myself writing over all of my life savings in order to follow her to Indonesia for a 2-month yoga teacher training. And as soon as I did that, I bought myself a journal, and I made a vow to tell the truth in it, because I was beginning to notice how often I lied to myself in my journal. Like, no, things in my relationship's perfect. Things are great, that's awesome. There's a lot of that sort of thing going on in my journal. So I was like, what, if I'm going to actually do this, if I'm going to go in search of myself, I better actually present the self that, actually exists.